So, I guess most of the World of Tanks players have been there at some point. You're grinding your way to that cool shiny looking tier 10 tank, but all of a sudden you research the next tank in that line and it just ends up being so terribly bad that you just want to quit that line immediately and never look back at it ever again. And especially for those little stinkers hidden in and between the World of Tanks tech trees, I made this top 5 video that ranks the absolute worst tanks that you can play in World of Tanks. So after watching this video, you guys will know exactly what tanks to avoid or free XP right away to save yourself a lot of frustration on the battlefield. And guys, when I say worst, I mean the absolute worst. This will also mean that each and every tank discussed in this list will most likely be as stock as possible to truly get the most out of their gruesome experience. And also, just like all of my other top 5 videos, this list will mainly be based on my personal experience playing these vehicles. So guys, please don't crucify me in the comment section for forgetting a tank that you would have picked. But for now, without further ado, let's dive straight into the list. So, to kick things right off, we have a tier 8 Chinese knockoff that tried so hard to match the strengths of its obviously stronger Soviet counterpart. And of course, this can no other be than the T-34-2. So I think that even some of you guys are thinking now, wait, is there a T-34-2 in World of Tanks? And I won't blame you for that, since the T-34-2 is so disgustingly underwhelming that most people even forget about its existence in the game, because they are very rare to spot on the battlefield, since hardly anybody will play this thing for fun. And at moments like this, I can just only think, China. Where did it all go wrong? Well, let's start off with the very poor gun selection this vehicle has, since the only two somewhat worth going for guns are either the 122mm or the 100mm gun, with the 100mm gun being the overall better option. Which, first of all, is unique to this vehicle and costs a ridiculous amount of XP to unlock it, but once you finally struggled your way up the 100mm gun, you will be greeted with very poor DPM and an almost unworkable standard penetration that is almost useless against most tier 9 and 10 tanks. And no, that's not all, we're not quite done yet, since it's not incredibly fast or well armored at the hull either. So what has this tank going for over its Soviet counterpart, the T-44? Well, maybe a slightly thicker turret, but other than that, absolutely nothing. And that is why the T-34-2 is a true stinker in the 1-2-1 line. Not that the 1-2-1 line was a good line to start off with. So that's why it's really deserved a number 5 spot on this list. So that was already quite a good start, wasn't it? But trust me, we are barely getting started, since at the number 4 spot we have a true flop with at least a British accent to it. It's of course no other than the Churchill VII. So I guess that there is no doubt that most of the ones who try to grind their way up to the superior Super Conqueror really considered quitting their grind right away after reaching the god-awful Churchill VII. But what is it that makes the Churchill VII so painful to play? Well, that's mostly because of its terrible 20 km/h top speed limit. It is just so frustrating to get your Churchill VII to the places you want it to be on time, before either your team has cleared the entire area already, or your team has already been evaporated by the enemies and you are waiting for the enemies to reach you and to feast on you next. Yeah, so what? You're a tier 6 heavy tank. When you're top tier, nobody can pen you and you can simply feast on them. Yeah, right. Maybe in real life the Churchill VII was a decent heavy tank, but in World of Tanks it's an absolute joke. Not only is it slow as fuck, also its armor is almost non-existent, since most equal tier guns can punch right through it, and if they can't, they just simply dab their 2 key and pen you anyways. And the funny thing about it is that you can't do shit about it either, because your gun is also almost not capable of fighting back effectively because of your gun's poor alpha damage, DPM and penetration. So overall, the Churchill VII is an absolute joke in this game and does in no way represent the Churchill VII as it really was like in World War II. Since if I were to load into a tier 6 battle, I would almost even much rather be in a KV-1 instead of this thing, which is 1 tier lower. Which to me is a good enough reason to put the Churchill VII at the number 4 spot on this list. Whoa, how can a tank possibly be worse than a Churchill VII? Well, trust me guys, we barely made it halfway yet. Since sitting at the number 3 position on this list, we pretty much have a Churchill VII with one of its balls cut off. And I think that some of you guys have already guessed it, that the number 3 spot can of course no other be than the Churchill gun carrier. So, the Churchill gun carrier. Also known as the Churchill game carrier, the Churchill clutch carrier, or the Churchill shit carrier. Name it how you want, but the level of sarcasm overflows most of the times when you see people talk about the Churchill GC. But the only thing I'm wondering is how high the Churchill GC's engineers were on tea and biscuits when designing this Frankenstein of a tank, since this tank just looks like a bad April Fool's joke to me. And it not only looks but also plays like an absolute joke in World of Tanks, since they literally took a Churchill's hull, stripped away that little bit of frontal armor it still had, and tried to squeeze the biggest gun they could fit into it. And what did the British got at the end? Well, they got all the flaws the Churchill VII had before, plus the fact that it has no armor and no turret. But solid chap, that is of course not an issue at all, since we, the superior United Kingdom, now have a fully mobile and very powerful heavy pounder gun that is well capable of taking on those bloody tigers. Wow! Good job, Britain, but please explain to me how you are planning to hit anything with your superior heavy pounder gun that is well capable of taking on the tigers with terrible aim time, accuracy, and gun traverse angles? I bet you didn't think about that for too long, did ya? But now, with all the jokes aside, that pretty much wraps up why I think the Churchill GC really fits well at the number 3 position on this list. So now moving on to the number 2 spot, where we're not quite done yet with the British tanks right here. Because how can this list be complete without the myth, the legend, the king of the memes, the HMS TOC 2. So before all of your TOC fanboys are gonna roast me in the comment section, don't worry, I love the TOC 2 as much as you do. But for everyone who doesn't quite get it, the TOC 2 is so terribly bad that it just instantly became a World of Tanks meme, and that is also just the reason why everyone likes the TOC so much, despite it being a terrible tank. But what is so terrible about the TOC then? Well, I could be very quick on this one. The TOC 2 is basically a Churchill VII with the exact same flaws, but on top of that an even slower top speed of 14 kilometers per hour. 14! 14 kilometers per hour. And also much weaker armor and a much bigger profile, which means it's much more vulnerable for artillery. And with your massive 1500 hit points, which is by the way the only good thing about the TOC, those piggies will have a lot of free damage to feed on you. But all in all, I still love the TOC so much, mainly for the memes of course, but I wouldn't want to play it anytime soon, since except for some fun and banter chat reactions, the TOC contributes absolutely zero to your team and your personal enjoyment in World of Tanks. And that is why the TOC 2 rightfully claims the number 2 spot on this list. So now guys, the moment you probably all have been waiting for, the number 1 spot. But wait, what could the number 1 spot possibly be? I mean, we had the Churchill VII, the gun carrier and the TOC, so what tank could possibly be worse than all of those previously mentioned? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you the number 1 spot and the worst tank in World of Tanks, the ARL V39. Whoa, really? The ARL V39? I mean, it definitely isn't a strong tank, but it ain't that bad, right? Well, if you're thinking just that, then I bet you have never played the ARL V39 in its fully stock state. And no, I am not exaggerating at all when I say that the ARL V39 is the worst of the worst tanks in its stock state. Since if you completely rushed the previous tank, the S35CA, and didn't bother grinding out the 105mm gun, that means that you are stuck with a tier 3 gun when you unlock the ARL V39. Yes, you heard that right, a tier 3 gun on a tier 6 tank destroyer. What? What the fuck? I mean, what the actual fuck? What are you supposed to do with a tier 3 gun when fighting tier 7 and 8 tanks? How the hell can you grind the amount XP needed to unlock the next gun with a tier 3 gun on a tier 6 tank? And even if you were smart enough to unlock the 105 gun on the S35CA, you still need round and about 5k XP to unlock the upgraded tracks on the ARL V39 in order to actually be able to mount the 105mm on there. And once you finally manage to struggle your way up that 5k XP and you have a half decent gun on there, you still need to cope with a way too narrow gun traverse angle, no armor whatsoever, and a terrible top speed and engine power, which makes the Churchill gun carrier look like a god in comparison to the ARL V39. But mainly because of that minimum XP to grind with that tier 3 gun, the ARL V39 beats all the previous tanks and claims the crown of being the worst of the worst tank in its stock state you can currently play in World of Tanks. So guys, that was all for this top 5 videos. If you enjoyed the video or found it useful, then please consider dropping a like. That would be very much appreciated. Also, if you're new to the channel and you like my videos, make sure to smash that subscribe button to stay up to date with all my future content. And also, let me know in the comments down below what your experiences are with these vehicles. I'm very curious on your stories as well. But for now, all that's left for me to say is, as always, have an awesome day, and I'll catch you guys later.
Jack it up.